Welcome to this new episode of Budget Analysis, where we will analyze the budget of a 25-year-old who unfortunately really has a starvation wage. I'm sorry to use this strong term, but it's the reality. Before we start, please subscribe to the channel and leave a like. A brief premise if you are new to the channel on how this format works. In the description of this video, you will find a link where you are rendered to this questionnaire where there are questions to answer me about your budget. Okay, many of my subscribers have done it, and I here on the channel once a month randomly pick a questionnaire to analyze it and give advice to the person who has submitted their budget to me. Big news, guys, I recently created the subscribers section of my channel where twice a month I do live budget analysis, not in a recorded video like now, but live. In this way, you can ask me questions, I can answer, we can discuss topics while we are analyzing the budget. And then guys, there will also be live Q&A sessions dedicated to specific topics. And this, guys, is also a way if you want a more direct contact with me, because unfortunately, I can no longer keep up with the comments under the videos or the messages you send me on Instagram or via email. So if you want direct contact with me, the subscribers section is the perfect place to do it. With that said, let's start with today's budget for the budget analysis. First of all, let's go to the end where I asked to tell a little bit about their personal story so we have some context. I am a 25-year-old guy from Sardinia. I live with my partner in the village where I was born and raised, 15 minutes away from my parents. About 4 years ago, I started my life in the world of 118. Before that, I did various jobs in the catering world, and even before that, as a sailor on passenger transport ships in the various coves that are in Sardinia. So already here we understand why the salary is so low. Soon we will see the figure that this 25-year-old boy earns, which I think is really absurd that there are such salaries in Italy today, but never mind, let's skip it. By the way, guys, I will also go to Sardinia soon to ask Italians how much they earn, because I really think something very interesting can come out. From here, we also understand that the fact of accepting such a salary comes from the fact that maybe in previous years he had a bit of jobs here and there, not a stable job. Now for 4 years he has found this stable job of 118. And so here is the stability also does not hurt, especially if you have spent a few years where you had small contracts and everything. So let's say that from a certain point of view, it is also understandable to accept this situation. Obviously, guys, if it's something temporary, if the final goal is obviously to improve, to increase your earnings, because today, where the cost of living has increased a lot, certain salaries should not be accepted. But it is possible that in an emergency situation, in a particular situation, certain conditions are accepted. I myself found myself doing it when I had to get out of my debt situation. So I'm not pointing the finger at this thing also, because I'm not here to judge in this format, because then everyone has their reasons, their stories, so I don't want to point the finger. It's the last thing I want to do. 25 years old, 118 ambulance driver, as we said, cohabiting without children, and thank goodness, because otherwise with such a salary it would not be sustainable. How much are your net monthly income, guys? 1,100 euros. So here he did not specify if it is a 40-hour job. On the one hand, I hope it is not a 40-hour job, because otherwise having this salary is really hallucinating, and it is certainly difficult to build a future, a family with such a salary. Okay, but soon I also want to get to the salary income speech, because it's something I've never touched on the channel, but now I want to start doing. Debts or loans? No, luckily he has no debts or loans, even though later he tells me that he has a 200 euro installment for the purchase of the car. Well, let's skip this little detail. Let's see the expenses he has for necessities. And so he tells me 400 euros of rent, which, however, paying it in two is only 200. So divided in half with his cohabitant, 90 euros of bills. 200 euros of installment for the purchase of the car, 100 euros for food expenses, 10 euros of phone top-ups, 50 euros of diesel. So first of all, let's analyze a little bit the general situation. So surely 200 euros of car installment with a salary of 1,100 euros is crazy. It's really crazy. Everything should be related to our income. Then obviously I know that under a certain figure you can't go. But here the point is, with such a salary, you give up the car and so you move, I don't know, by bike or on foot. Obviously, if you have the possibility to go to work in this way or you have to act differently. It must be said that 100 euros of food expenses are really few. You are really good. 25 euros a week to eat are really few. Here he doesn't tell me why. Maybe, I don't know, he goes to eat at his parents or he self-produces. I don't know. There may be a reason it seems very low even for Sardinia, but this is a bit my consideration. 50 euros of diesel per month. 50 euros of diesel per month means that in the end, you don't use the car that much. So the question is it really necessary or is there maybe an alternative? Because maybe, I don't know, even with a scooter 50, that costs you much less to buy. It costs you much less maintenance and it costs you much less gasoline. You can maybe go to work. And in this situation where the income is really tight, we have to make this kind of reasoning. I mean, do you really need the car? Or with a little sacrifice, a little effort, could you do without it? This is definitely the first point where I would stop. Another point where I want to dwell is the lack of precision regarding expenses, because soon I will show you the numbers don't add up. Okay, for what reason? Because he tells me how much you spend each month for leisure. Next question in general, about 100 euros between bars, restaurants and various outings, which is fine because for a 25-year-old boy it is not exaggerated. For the optional he spends 40 euros. But when I ask him how much you are saving each month, for how long, he tells me I can't put aside anything if not every now and then some small sum, okay? And it can obviously be the unexpected fund. He doesn't have it. However, then he tells me when I ask him what prevents you from achieving what you desire, certainly the cost of life is a big problem, is incredible. Nowadays, how 100 euros come out of your own pockets without even realizing it. And this is true going to do the shopping. It is almost impossible not to leave spending at least 100 euros to have a food expense that covers you all week. Here is the problem found, because 100 euros of food expense are not monthly but are weekly. So here the numbers add up, because in this way I had a total of 790 euros of monthly expenses when it is not so. Now this reveals something very important, and that is the clarity. That is, the main problem of this person is that they do not have clarity of their own expenses. That is, where your money ends up. If you don't know precisely, obviously managing money becomes more difficult. Okay, because everything is a bit messy, randomly, and in such a situation we can't afford to manage, randomly our money. So my advice is definitely to start from the annual budget. I cover this in detail in my video course, where you have a complete method to learn how to manage your money and save. You can create an emergency fund. Find details in the video description if interested. Well, this could certainly be a way to have a method. It's clear to understand how to manage your own money beyond this. The point is clarity. That is, you must have a clear understanding of your situation and from how you responded to me. Here I understand that you do not have a clear understanding of your situation. Okay, so this is also a starting point. Then what would you like to achieve financially? You tell me. Certainly being able to save some money, having a fund set aside, that allows you to have good financial stability. So then with this salary, it is not feasible unless, as I was telling you, you don't act on the installment of the car. Okay, it's the only point I see where you can act, because on the rest, it doesn't seem like there's much you can do. Also because he's not one to spend and splurge everywhere. It's also true that here he tells me, in response to the question about what difficulties he encounters in managing money, he doesn't deny that he likes to spend beyond the problems of the cost of living, which in my opinion are now impossible. But when he tries to put something aside, something always comes up to pay, or for other situations you are forced to touch that small sum that you had previously set aside. So here he is honest, he says that he likes to spend anyway. Well, this is also a bit the behavior of people who don't have money aside, who have financial difficulties. Okay, if you are a person who tends to spend, you have to make efforts, okay? You really have to act on self-discipline. Have an iron discipline. Because if you are inclined to spend money and you've always been used to spending money before changing a little bit the mentality, it takes a period, okay? So at the beginning, we have to have discipline. This discipline must become a habit. Then once it has become a habit, things will be much simpler, but there definitely needs to be a period where we have to make an effort. Okay, now before getting a bit to the salary issue, I want to touch on the topic of savings, because when the difference between our income and our expenses is too low, and so we manage to put aside little and maybe we can't even do it every month, this situation is very common. That is, we find ourselves at a point where, Dan, I don't have time to put away 300 euros that I have to change the tires of the car and I have to take them. I understand this situation and you should not be discouraged by this situation, because at the beginning it can happen that you make several attempts before gaining a little momentum and managing to put aside a sum that can create a hard core, which in this case could easily be 1,000 euros. That is, with this income and these expenses already having 1,000 euros aside, he already creates a small security for himself. Then obviously the emergency fund should be higher, but already with 1,000 euros, it could be an interesting thing. I understand this situation. As soon as I put it away, I have to take it. But there is one thing to say. Several things then. First of all, you go to touch the money for a real emergency, or you have a bit of an easy hand, so you go to touch your money too easily. 2, when we are in this situation, we must strive to avoid touching that money until we reach a fairly high figure. Precisely to establish a solid foundation of 1,000 euros. If you have an unexpected event, it's really unexpected, you can wait, or you have to pay for this repair immediately. I don't know, the unexpected can be of various kinds, but do I have to do it immediately or by patching up? I can maybe wait those 2 or 3 months in order to set aside more money. Another question, is there a free alternative or other possibilities? Because sometimes the problem is that we touch this money too easily. That is, we immediately give up. We say, well, I have that money. I do with that no at the beginning. You can't afford to do so at the beginning. You also have to say, okay, that money doesn't exist. I don't have it. Act as if you didn't have that money and find alternatives. I can guarantee you that 80% of the time there are alternatives. Okay? Then there are also cases where you are forced to take that money, and that's fine, it doesn't matter, you will start from scratch, even though I know it is a bit frustrating to always start from scratch. But certainly this type of attitude is needed until we have reached a certain level. The other thing to do, if you really want to turn your situation around, you have to spend at least 6 months to a year where you are totally focused on saving and creating your emergency fund. Minimize your expenses as much as possible, making sacrifices. I know it's a hurdle. Skipping vacations, not going out, whatever else you do, you won't die for it. Then to have a more comfortable situation in the future and you maximize your income as much as possible. That is, I have to go deliver pizzas, I have to go do, I don't know, a humble job to have that extra 200, 300 euros. I'm going to do it because if you really care about turning your situation around, you also have to be willing to do things you've never done before. Because if you keep doing the same things, the situation doesn't change. I hope this is helpful because I know that at the beginning of the journey, when we want to save money, it's easy to find ourselves in this situation. You don't have time to set something aside before you have to touch it. And then at some point you get fed up and don't save anything anymore. Big mistake, guys. It takes perseverance. Then tell me what you would like to ask me. How can I help you? I don't know, maybe a healthier and more controlled management or a method to manage to set aside a sum of money. So here already that he tells me, I don't know, a bit of lack of clarity emerges. That is, he doesn't know well what he wants. Where he wants to go, what his goals are. Among other things, speaking of goals, sorry if I do a little self-promotion, but my course in such a situation is useful and you can find it in the description of this video. I also tell you a bit about how to set goals and then a method to manage to set aside a sum of money. Then I want to talk about work, guys, because at 25 years old, accepting a situation like this is okay for a period of difficulty, but it should not be the norm. That is, accepting a situation like this also means not giving yourself value, undermining your own value and thinking you are worth this when instead there are many other alternatives and many other possibilities. The point is that, okay, for a period I can also find a second job and whatnot, but it is not the definitive solution. What we should aim for is to get paid more for the same hours of work. Even better, you should get out of the dynamic of trading time for money. Because there is a limit. That is, if I always reason for so many hours, so much money, I am always a bit stuck. I always have a bit of a limit because the hours of the day are only those. That is, it's not like I can work more than 10 hours a day. 12 hours a day, I've done it and I gave myself a nice nervous breakdown after a while, so these are rhythms that are not sustainable. Because then we end up compromising our health, okay? And this is not good either. The point is to get out of the exchange dynamic. My time for money. Enter the dynamic where I charge you based on the results that I bring or based on the impact I have. Let me give you an example. If I start selling something, or this also applies to sellers, that is, if I spend an hour of work to sell a product for 10 euros, and I spend the same time to sell a product for 10,000 euros, and maybe I work on commission, you understand that my income is totally different with the same hours of work because I'm not exchanging my time for money. But I am paid based on my results. The more results or more money I earn, this way I can get out of this dynamic. It's a slightly complex topic that I would maybe like to tackle in another video. Let me know in the comments if you're interested. Indeed, tackle this topic, but it's an important thing. Because anyway, if you are employees, you have to realize and be aware that you always have a limit, okay? If you want something different, you have to start working and thinking differently. So, no longer get paid based on your time, but get paid based on your results. With that said, guys, I remind you the link in the description of this video. To answer the questionnaire, submit your budget if you want to participate. Leave a like, write me in the comments what you think, and as usual, we'll see you around.